Standing tall among the people I admire in Flint is a short, white-haired, white lady who lives on the west side of town. She's one of the undersung heroes of the Flint water crisis and an outspoken critic of the economic injustices she sees and endures every day. I have her permission to tell you a bit of her story, and even though she doesn't hide behind any assumed names on social media, I'll use a different name for her this morning. Martha isn't a lifelong Flintstone. She moved here over a decade ago, right before the Great Recession of 2008. Martha bought, at the peak of the housing market, a solid, charming, and modest bungalow on a side street off Corunna Road, just past where the road bends due west. You'll remember what happened next. The economy bottomed out, jobs became scarce yet again, housing prices fell, and Martha's neighborhood fell apart. Foreclosures and evictions kicked people out, and slumlords and blight slithered in. Martha works hard to keep her home well maintained, despite some physical limitations. Because her house looks nice from the outside, she says neighbors and passers-by often ask her for money. They think she's rich. But Martha is poor. She lives on a fixed retirement income insufficient to the task of a stable and modest lifestyle. She takes in sewing and alterations to help make ends meet. I just took all my suits and trousers to Martha's. I'm pleased to give her some business. My baggy clothes are the byproduct of losing 30 pounds. Martha is poor, so necessary home and car repairs often wait. And as bad as this is, it was even worse. A few years ago, when her adult daughter came down with cancer, Martha couldn't afford a medical test that might have saved her daughter's life. This quote from a book about the church and economics made me think of Martha when I read it. As I walked by her side and watched her works, it was revealed to me that Lady Poverty was a murderess. Martha is poor. Martha is angry. Martha is angry by slow police response times to what she sees as a low-priority neighborhood. Martha is angry by news stories of plenty of money to be found for downtown redevelopment. The new hotel planned just down the street from here is her latest complaint. And Martha is angry because she feels forced out, dispossessed. I think I'm not wanted in Flint anymore, she said to me the other day. Why do you think that is? I said. It's because I'm poor, she said. I don't fit into their plans, their model. You probably think I'm crazy. No, Martha, I said. I think you're one of the sanest and most honest people I know. And honesty makes powerful people nervous. If it's all so bad as this, why doesn't Martha just move away? The main reason is that she's financially stuck. Martha bought high, remember. Paid a fair price then, but she's well underwater on her mortgage now. Because the neighborhood's gone to hell, her property value has gone to hell. Who would buy her place despite its charm. And even if she could sell, she wouldn't come close to clearing the note. Lady Poverty is a murderess. She takes lives and hopes. Lady Poverty, defined another way, is the limiter of choices. She makes people stuck. Martha's story reminds me of today's gospel passage from Mark, with the rich scribes and the poor widow. Historians of Jesus' day tell us that the scribes, because of their education and literacy, they earned their living by drafting documents and managing properties. We know that widows in Jesus' day, women without the protection of a husband or grown sons, widows were especially vulnerable to fraud and susceptible to abuse. Dishonest scribes could make a lot of money by taking advantage of widows. Jesus tells us as much. Beware of the well-dressed, well-respected, and overly pious, long-winded scribes, he said. They devour widows' houses, leaving them destitute, and from the abundance of this wealth they feed the temple treasury. In contrast, the poor widow, I wonder just how she came to be poor. The poor widow puts in her last 2 cents, everything, all she had to live on. Note that there is no miracle story here. There's no happy ending for this widow, unlike the widow of Zarephath with a never-emptied jar of flour and jug of oil we heard about in today's reading from the first book of Kings. When she gave her last 2 cents to the temple treasury, she didn't find 20 more jangling in her purse. Like Martha of Flint, the widow of Jerusalem stays poor. And Lady Poverty is a murderess. The poor widow of Jerusalem often is held up as a devout woman, trusting enough in God's provision so as to willingly, gratefully give the last of her money. While this interpretation may be valid, the Bible teaches over and over again to trust and not be afraid. This interpretation has also been abused by televangelists and some other preachers, cajoling seniors on fixed incomes to write checks and empty their savings. I see the poor widow less as a pious church lady and more as a prophetic witness against the temple. I like to read the poor widow's response, surprise, surprise, as a protest against the system. She's down to her last 2 cents. The temple requires her to give if she wants to be a member in good standing, to fulfill whatever gift or dues are owed in order to belong. I imagine her standing in line and watching the scribes. Maybe one of them is the scribe who devoured her house and left her flat broke. I imagine her watching them all putting in wads of cash, walking around money for them, and bursting with pride when the totals are announced on the pledge drive thermometer. Then it's her turn. She holds up her 2 cents, looks at the crowd and says, "You want my 2 cents worth? This is it. It's all I've got. You say I have to give to your temple to fit in, to belong here. You know what? You can have it." And she flings the coins in the hopper. her head held high while her guts are churning because she knows she's done for. Jesus neither praises nor condemns the poor widow. He simply observes, sitting across from the action, taking it all in, shaking his head, I imagine, while he reports what he sees to his disciples. The temple, or at least this version of it, had become a pay-to-play institution. And Jesus, we know, was no friend of this iteration of the temple, its priests and scribes and cliques. His Father's house of prayer, as he said, truly had become a thieves' hideout. My friend Martha has wondered about what it takes to be a member of St. Paul's. She's worried that she won't fit in, that she doesn't know enough about the ins and outs of the service, that she'll accidentally do something disrespectful, and, to today's point, that she can't afford to give much money, or any money. Martha does come to Mass on the odd Wednesday, and sometimes she'll press a small bill into my hand. Despite her protestations and fears, I consider her a parishioner every bit as much as any of the rest of you. I even sent her a pledge letter, asking the same thing I ask of each of you. Pledge and give something in response to the loving, liberating, life-giving gospel of Jesus Christ. Pledge and give something to help this church change lives. Even if it's $1 a week. Why would I ask Martha to give, knowing the shape she's in? Because there's dignity in the asking. If she knew that even $1 a week helps the cause, then who am I to cut her out? What would she think that I think of her? And yet, at the same time, here's the paradox in today's scriptures. St. Paul's is not a pay-to-play parish. I don't want anybody's last 2 cents. If you simply cannot give, we won't require it of you in order to belong. Trust me, there are enough people here who could give $100 a week if they chose to, and a few do and beyond, to pick up the slack. That's what Christians do. So yes, while I ask a pledge and a gift from each of you, there's something else at stake here, a deeper need. What's as important as $1 a week or 100? And in the case of the 2 women I've talked about today, what's crucial to our spiritual maturity as a parish is this. The temple needed the poor widow of Jerusalem to stand as a prophetic witness against the systems and institutions that failed her. I'm glad that Jesus pointed her out and that St. Mark told her story, even though the temple didn't listen. This parish needs Martha of Flint to stand in prophetic witness against the systems and institutions that fail her. I'm glad I could point her out and that she allowed me to tell her story. Are we listening?